Hello, and welcome to Practical Intuition with Kay. This is the show where we are always working to help you live the life that you really truly want to be living and not the one that somebody else told you you ought to be. And I am so excited because I am here today with a friend, a wonderful coach, someone who I've had the pleasure of getting to know over the last year or two. Nicole Gallucci. She is at a really exciting place in her own life. And you get to spend the next 45 minutes or so with her, just like I do. So welcome, welcome, Nicole. I'm so glad you're here.
I'm so glad I'm here. They get to spend the next 45 minutes with us. That's the best part. Sitting talking to yourself can get, a little daunting and boring, actually. So this is awesome. I'm so excited to be here, actually.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, you're so welcome. So, it's, you know what, I'm actually going to start from a funny place, which is, I don't usually start here, but I love that your website, your Instagram, your LinkedIn, all of these things are streamlined to be Nicole Gallucci, like NicoleGallucci.com. It's so simple. And
Yep, you're
yeah,
right.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, you go, girl.
Well, you've been sharing with me that there's a redesign going on over at your website, and I got curious about what's happening over there.
And it's a great question. I think there's a redesign in my life. I think we're always redesigning our lives and figuring things out. And so as you know, I have kind of transitioned, and I'm still doing agency work. So I'm saying I'm transitioning, but I'm kind of just sort of shifting the allocation of time. Mm-hmm. So I still do agency work. It's my first love. I'm a strategist and creative person at heart. So I still am very much in that world because it actually fuels part of where I'm transitioning to a certain extent, which is I teach at the post-grad and the college and university level. And I teach marketing. So I teach strategy and marketing and creative thinking and all those good things. And so as part of that, and as part of working with my students, I'm actually making changes to how I share in terms of the content that I share. So that's caused some changes to my website. And it's actually one of my students who is doing the rebuild with me. And so he has started his own agency. And so I think I'm his first client. So I'm actually super excited about that. And he's totally awesome. And then I have another student that's working with me on my socials. And so we've been doing some testing. So for me, the positive part of that is that obviously for me, it's nice that they're my students, but we're learning together. The digital space is something that is changing by the nanosecond, frustratingly enough. And so they're helping me to navigate all that as I teach them about the strategy and the creative thinking behind it. And Nicole Gallucci is who I am. And that's what they all call me. They either call me that, NG, or Mama G. All my people who work with me call me Mama G, which, I figured Nicole Gallucci was the safest of the three to brand everything. And so it just makes life simpler. And that's, separate from my career and my agency life. This is how people kind of think of me. And it's very personal because you'll see on my Instagram, I put Post-it notes on my forehead on my own learning that I then share, which is my version of Oprah's aha moments, all those things.
So I think it's really interesting to start a conversation because so many, and I don't mean to belittle this because there are a lot of challenges that come with the world of social media. And what I've noticed for myself was that when I go to social media in the right mindset, which I'm doing a lot more and more often, I find people like you who feel like family. And what I also notice is that when I create from the right feeling in my heart, it feels like family too. So I wonder if we could spend a little time talking about social media.
Sure. When we talk a lot about social media, I'm an experiential marketer at heart. I feel like we create events and ways for people to connect live. But what social media allows us to do is share story. And so I think that was the initial intent of social media. It was a way for us to connect, share, like it's literally started off as initially just sharing photos and finding each other. And I think it's morphed to obviously much more than that. And who even knows where it's going to go. And now, as you look at artificial intelligence, you and I can put something into Chat GPT, and within a few mouse clicks, we literally could have months worth of content that we could post out there. So how does that fit in this familial environment that you relate to, that I think many of us actually relate to? So I think what we're going to start to see when I talk about with my students is a little bit of a divide in all of that. So I think, we quickly say, okay, this is the group where we're keeping up on each other's lives. And then this is the group that is selling me products that, as a result of listening to me talking over here, thinks I might be interested in. And I think then there's also the group where you can learn from. So I think there's a lot of amazing mentors and coaches online. And I think there's also, creators that are 100% transparent, authentic, and sharing their lives very openly and honestly. And then I think obviously there's a group that aren't. But I think that that's true of life. I think you meet people in your lives who you sit down at your kitchen table with, and you're like, oh my God, I'm loving having dinner with you. And there's other people who you're not quite sure you want to invite them into your front door and into your home and into that safe environment. So I think the same is true on the internet. I think the same is true on social media platforms. So I think it's incumbent upon us to decide who we connect to and how we connect to them.
Oh, wow. That is a really good point. A lot of it comes back to, it sounds like from what you're saying, a lot of it comes back to having an internal intuition, maybe, of what is our feeling about this person in front of us already,
Oh my God.
before doing the listening internally before we let them into our safe world.
I
Right.
think you have to have a high sense of awareness now, just in general, to survive. If I could talk to my younger self, or one thing that I probably try to talk to my own children about, is really having an awareness of your own gut feelings and your own gut reactions when you have this different stimulus in front of you. And, if you are following somebody's social media and envy or jealousy is bubbling up, then is that about them or is that about you? If you're following them and you're going, oh my God, they got promoted and they're like doing great, and you feel joy for them, then also that's about you, And so I think we also can use it as an opportunity to learn about our own growth and development. But I think at the end of the day, that is true of anything that we come up to, whether you're walking along the street and you're going into a coffee shop and you bump into somebody and you have a great conversation. If you're in a bookstore, there's certain books that we gravitate towards, or certain ones that make us, nervous. I think that's just true of everything in life. So I think it's our reaction to those different stimuli that invites us to either go the next step and make some changes in our lives, or decide, actually, that just doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
And so we go in a different direction. And I think either is acceptable. You just have to do what feels right to you.
Yeah. And oh, wow, I love this. So a lot of listeners to our show, a lot of folks listening right now are parents. And I think this is a really interesting point. I think it's a really interesting point in my development, because I'm on a similar journey to a lot of listeners, really, regardless of what age their kids are, which is to say, letting go of worrying about outcomes for my child and my loved ones, and instead understanding that they have what they need inside them already. Everything that they need is inside them, just like everything that I need is inside me. And that includes, we have instilled in them they had in them, and maybe we fostered it, amazing capabilities to tap into their intuition, to know if something feels safe and trustworthy or not. And I'm curious if you see that playing out in social media. Does that make sense? Does that question
Yeah.
even make
And
sense?
so, it's funny because I actually had this conversation with one of my own children recently. And I think we see a myriad of personalities and personas on social media. But I also think we see that in our day-to-day life. So I think that we see people who come at things from a perspective of confidence, embracing it. We see people who come at things with empathy. We also see people who come at things with, oh my gosh, that feels really uncomfortable. And I actually was about to write a post just before I sat down on, beware of the fear mongers, because I actually have had this person come into my circle. And whenever we're in a conversation, it's about, oh my God, did you hear this is going to happen? Oh my God. And I'm like, oh my
Mhm.
God, like I'm not that person. So I'm finding that while I really like this person, I'm having to, shift our conversations. And I think perhaps it's actually having an influence on them because I don't see everything from that place of fear. But to your point, I think that we have a GPS system inside of us. And so I think that the good news is that it's a great navigation tool, but I also think it's something that's constantly developing because we're constantly in uncharted territory. So
Mm.
I think, on the one hand, while we truly empower our children and hope that we provide a safe space, even as parents, we've faltered because we have thought we're doing the right thing. And then it turns out that potentially we're not, or we've had a reaction to something. I've done it myself. If I could turn back time, would I turn back time on some of the times that perhaps I wasn't definitely as sensitive or as cautious or as methodical as I could have been? Oh my gosh, for sure.
Mm.
Absolutely. But that's the human experience. So I think we just have to stop once we do realize that and apologize or not,
Yeah.
and then have the learning. And I think that all of that's okay. And I think we have to give each other room for that. I think we have to give each other room to kind of go, I overstepped there, or I didn't do that correctly, and I'm sorry. And then to that person that they're speaking to, it's like, it's okay. Like, let's move forward from this learning, because chances are it could be learning for both of you. And I think that's often the lens that I come from. I think many of us who are coaches come from having learned a lot and actually having had some of our own pain and some of our own challenges and some of our own successes and failures. And so I think then, especially as we age and we go into this next chapter, it's like, yeah, I definitely would like to make life easier for the next one in line. Because if I can help you avoid a stumble, I'm going to share the learning. It's your choice what path you go down. But if I
Mm.
could share that learning and make your path a little bit easier, then I think it's our responsibility as we transition to being elders to open the door for those conversations. I think we've been doing that for, centuries,
Yeah.
but I think for us, it's still a new thing to do. And for the generation that we're doing it with, it's new to them,
Yeah.
because it's not like we have somebody from 1,000 years ago sitting beside us. And yet everything we learn about says that that's always been the way knowledge has been transitioned and transferred, but it's still a new transference for us.
Well, I mean, to me, the question that comes up immediately, Nicole, is if you're the elder in this situation and someone is sitting with you and they're asking you to share your experience and your learning, like what would you say?
What would I say? So I think I very much cater that conversation to the context that is most applicable to them. As
Mm.
I sit here, I'm 57 years old and I've got 3 young adult children that range from 26 to 31. My career has, been quite full. I've done lots of different things. I think what I would say to them, and I wish somebody had said this to me, would be, you've got to hold your own hand. I think
Mm.
that as much as we want to lean into others and lean on others, at the end of the day, you have to think about what you stand for, and make sure that that really resonates with you physically and mentally, because that's when we're in alignment on the decisions that we make. And it's okay to stand for something and then have the conversation and then evolve from that standing point, because you're going to evolve and shift and grow. So I would say, know that, then know that you're going to grow and evolve and move forward with that. I wish somebody had told me to breathe. I wish in the times of hot moments, uh, with either frustration or anger or fear, either way, or a new situation, somebody had said, you know, it's okay. You actually don't have to make that decision at this exact moment.
Mm,
And go for a walk. You can sleep on it. And I truly wish I had done that. I made a lot of decisions in the heat of a moment, good, bad, and otherwise, like good moments and bad moments. And I kind of wish I was like, ooh, you know what? I'm going to go for a walk and then I'm going to come back on that,
mm,
and I think that, especially when we're younger, we don't realize that we can actually say that to anyone. So I kind of think that's definitely, I think it's amazing what a pause does. That's where the work is. I think a pause is where the work is. And I think that's what, if anything now, I definitely am still a workaholic, but I give myself that moment to pause. I think that's why, we talk so much now about mindfulness, about meditation, about breathing. That was not something we talked about 30 or 40 years ago. We our first breath, we come out, we're born and we come out screaming, and we're waiting for that. Everybody, as a parent, as a mom giving birth, you're waiting for that first breath to make sure the baby's okay. Then you never talk about breathing again.
mm.
That's actually in labor. And at that exact moment is the only time we have ever talked about breathing until the past few years. And I'm like, oh my gosh, why didn't we talk about this? Because it's amazing how we can change our physiology just by breathing and change the decisions that we make. It's like, oh my God, for the first time, I coach a corporate client and a corporate team. And so this is tier 1 corporation, very blue chip. And we started off a meeting with a meditation. You can only imagine, like in an industry where that's kind of like, are you kidding me right now? And it changed the entire meeting because everybody just took it down a notch. And I'm not going to lie, I got a few people who were like, oof, this is like not feeling comfortable initially. And a few people who were like, oh my God, like, can I sit the way I want to sit and all of that? And after it, everyone was, oh my God, that was great. And they now start their meetings with meditations only because it brings everybody into that same safe space.
Yeah.
And it's not like it's a 15-minute meditation. It's 2 minutes of breathing and calming everyone. And just because we're frantic, right? We're all living these crazy lives. It just brings everybody together and we're all like here and present. And I think we've been running so hard for so long that the here and present is what comes with breathing. Because you
Yeah.
can't breathe for the future. You can't breathe for the past. You can only breathe right now.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I thank you for that. And I want to pause here and acknowledge and say thank you.
Thank you. Honestly, sometimes we don't even reflect on these things until we're actually having the conversation.
Yeah. And a couple of things come up. We had how families are all spread out too these days, right?
Oh, I'm very much in that.
Yeah. So we had a family emergency unfolding a couple months ago, and I'm the big sister, so not that I was the only one taking care of others, but in the big sister role, I was doing some things that felt important to do. And at the end of this day, my husband sort of looked at me at one point, and I was like, my
Of
husband
course,
looked
I
at me
do understand
and he
totally.
said, and he said to me, take a breath. And I did. I remember stopping and taking a breath, and immediately I just sat down on the couch and I just went and I started crying. I had not had a thought for myself about how I was doing, since this started. And it was just such he gave me the moment of grace. I
Mm.
really, really needed that, right?
Mhm.
And then the other thing that comes up for me is who was amazing at this was Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers.
Mhm.
Um, he he at commencement ceremonies when he was giving a presentation or a talk, he is a huge um, someone that I really try to sort of think about, like what would he do in a situation or whatever. And so in a little less than a week, the 10th anniversary of the Boston Marathon bombing will happen, because the Boston Marathon will be run. And I grew up I live now just outside of Boston. The Boston Marathon for me was always a huge thing growing up. It's a huge family event. It's such fun. And the marathon the bombing was I didn't understand it. I mean, why
Mhm.
would
Of
somebody do that,
course.
right? And I remember that was the first time that Mr. Rogers's message of he said, when I was a boy and something upsetting would happen, or I would see something upsetting in the news, my mother would always say, look for the helpers. You'll always find people who are helping. And boy, that became important when that was unfolding.
Mhm.
And um, I love the idea of looking for the helpers and being a helper, right? And anyway, so one of the ways I think Mr. Rogers is very helpful is in coming back to the pause. And recently I was rewatching the documentary of his life. I believe it's called The Good Neighbor. I could be wrong about that, but not the Tom Hanks biopic, but the documentary of Fred Rogers' life.
Right, that
And
his son did, right? I think that was the one his son did.
both of his sons are in it. I don't remember who did it, but yes, you do get to hear from his family. It's wonderful. And at the end of the documentary, the person filming asks um, for folks to stop and think of someone who, and like Fred Rogers' words are things like, think of the person who loved you into loving, who sang you
I
into
love that.
singing, who talked you into talking, right? It's so beautiful. And then they film as folks are doing that. So the people you've been hearing about, the people who run the Fred Rogers Institute, the people who, the other early childhood professionals, the ministers, the folks who produce the show, like all these beloved people, um, you hear them, you see them reflecting. Very often you see tears coming into their eyes, and then they are asked, who did you think of? And it's lovely. I think to be given that, you can see the joy as they're sharing about these beautiful people in their lives, and the opportunity to have that pause and think on that is
Mhm.
amazing. And um and you're sharing it now, Nicole. It's such a beautiful message.
And so it's funny. I went to. I'm a huge Robin Sharma fan, and I've read all of his books. I follow him avidly. But I went to one of his conferences once, and he had this gentleman speak, and I wish I could remember the gentleman's name, and unfortunately I cannot. But he was. It was all about nutrition and health, and he said when he feels his adrenaline rising as a result of a situation, his question to himself is, "What would love do?"
Mm,
Or what would love say? So very similar to Fred Rogers. And it's funny because we don't actually ask ourselves that. And I come from a very corporate background. Was I grew up during the Mad Men. I lived the Mad Men era, and
mm,
then have, grown my career with that glass ceiling, etc. And if I had in any way indicated that part of my being, oh my God, like laughed out of the room, have been laughed out of the room
mm.
for reflecting that part of the reading, that persona. And so it's interesting though. I think now, the positive is that we're making headway, and that mentality is making its way into boardrooms and offices everywhere. And I think, as much as COVID had all of its negatives, the silver lining that it did have is that we are having these conversations more and more, and we're opening the door to going deeper into what's working for us and what's not working for us. And it's okay to say, this situation isn't working for me. And
Yeah,
let me share with you how this is impacting me. And I think that's okay,
yeah,
because
yeah,
one size doesn't fit all, even in the
yeah,
working world, and we just sort of assume it's supposed to.
yeah, yeah. I love that. And I love these reflections on the corporate world too. And I I want to share a story that comes up for me actually about my father, who he worked in an insurance company. He worked his way up from a clerk, and he's shared about that on the shows. Very early
Love
on,
that.
he's kind of shared about his experience. He worked for Sun Life of Canada, which
Yep.
it has a different name now. I don't remember what it is, but anyway. Um, and when we moved down here with Sun Life, and then he ended up as a vice president here in Massachusetts. And he worked with a woman named Allison Bryant. And I'm sharing the name because I have so much gratitude for Allison Bryant. I've never met her. Boy, would I like to meet her. Or maybe I have met her, but it was so long ago. Anyway, this came up when I was recently skiing in Colorado with my parents live in Colorado now, and there was this day of learning for me. Negative emotions produce learning. So part of my learning that day was I had lost my pass. I was crying. Um, I was feeling so under pressure to find my pass, my ski pass, so that we could get up to the hill. Everything felt like it was going wrong that day. I'm crying. My dad is not trying to pressure me, but I'm still feeling the pressure, right? And um, we were on the way up to the hill, and this will become important later. And my dad was sharing with me that when he was an executive in this insurance company, a fellow executive named Allison Bryant he would describe her as coming into his office, slamming the door, and this was decades ago. So we're talking like 80s, 90s. She would slam the door and she would say to him, "You don't listen." And my dad says that from that he learned to be a better listener.
True.
And sometimes she would come in and she would slam the door and she would say, "Women cry. Men don't cry, but women cry. And you need to know this." And from that, my father learned that if a woman is crying, it doesn't mean that she needs something fixed or that she is broken. Sometimes women just cry. They just do. And he was sharing that with me. And then later that day, I I got a hamstring injury later that day. So I have always been my birthday's next week. I'm 51, I'm almost 52. And all of my life I have charged onto the ski hill at my most aggressive, most thrilled. I go right to the black diamonds. I love skiing and I take it on, right? So I did that on this particular day. And by the second run, something was clearly wrong, but I was ignoring it because I wanted to keep skiing. And so I decided to take a break. My father goes out and does another run. By the time he comes back in, actually, it's really funny too, because there was a baby being bounced on a knee at the lodge at the top of the hill. The way that this particular resort works is most people are at the top of the hill. And this baby gives me this huge big grin and I started crying and I said to them, I needed that baby grin. And I don't even know what, in the moment I'm going why are you saying this? This is such a weird thing to say, but I needed that baby grin. So I'm stretching and I'm not feeling right, but pushing it down. You know what I mean? My father comes in, he has a drink of water, he eats a bar. I say to him, I'm just going to go to the bathroom, then I'll be ready. And I'm in the bathroom and I'm like, something feels off. What feels off? And I thought of our mutual friend, Monique Giroux, who's
Yep.
our other mutual friend, Andrew Moss's partner. Monique broke her ankle on a pine cone in the Serbian forests last October or last fall. And she wrote a beautiful blog post about all of the ways that her intuition was trying to communicate before she did that, and that she wasn't listening. And I'm in the bathroom, something's off, something's off. And I remembered Monique and I thought, you know what I need to do is listen to my intuition. And I thought, I can't go back out there. I need to do something different here. So, and Monique, if you're listening, I'm so grateful to you for that. Oh my gosh. It would have been such a different day. I have a history of tearing muscles. It would have been such a different day if I hadn't listened. So anyway, I go back out to my father and I started crying and I said, Dad, I need to not keep going. And I don't know how to get down. It's a 3.5 mile ski run down from this gigantic Rockies, Colorado Rockies resort. My father happens to have been, for 15 years after he retired, he was a ski instructor at Breckenridge. He's a level 2 PSIA certified ski instructor, right? I said, can we pretend that I'm your student and you can please tell me how to get down? And he was like, okay, well, first of all, you're not going to do your aggressive nuttiness of regular skiing. We're going to
For
take
sure.
the easiest run down. I'm going to be behind you the whole way. So we start going and I immediately start crying. Like I'm going to cross England at that point. We're now, as you and I are recording, Nicole, it's about 3 weeks away, which is so exciting.
So
This will go
amazing.
up while I'm there. But then it was like 5 or 6 weeks away, and I was like losing my mind about that. And so I'm crying, and my father is like, we're doing our slow go down, and he's being great, but he was so worried about me. And we had this shared language. I could say, Dad, I'm having an Allison Bryant moment. Like I'm not hurting anymore. I'm caught up in thoughts. That's what this is. And he could relax a little bit, right? Like it was so nice to have that.
Mhm.
Does that make
It's
sense?
so true. Oh my God, no, it's so true. And it's funny because as you relate the story, shared language is so important. But I was having actually a conversation with my mom yesterday because she was explaining something to me. And I said to her, actually, Mom, you don't have to justify it. You can just feel it.
Mm,
And I was like, what has made us even like, it's great that you're in this safe space with your dad, but what caused Allison to have to go and
and
scream and
say that,
kind of
right?
go, oh my gosh, and I do think that that's the positive of where we are in 2023 is that I think we're even backing away from having to justify things. It's just like, this just doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
And I don't
Yeah.
have it all figured out as to why it doesn't feel right, but I'm just going to let you know it doesn't feel right for me. And the other person kind of goes, okay,
Yeah.
as opposed to, well, I'm going to dig into this and you're going to have to tell me this, you know, long story and you're going to have to justify everything, which is so hard on a person.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that actually then is why people don't actually say this doesn't feel right for me because they don't want to have to explain. That takes more energy out of them
That
than,
was, yeah. And I love this because so it made it so, because one of the things that happened in the bathroom was I was like, I am going to have to explain this to my dad.
and you didn't
And
have to.
and I didn't have to. In fact, I was able to say to him, this is happening. And I mean, and he immediately understood and was incredibly helpful. But then for him to see me crying and to be able to say this is an Allison Bryant moment made it so much easier. That shared language made it so much
Right?
easier. He could then just understand that like I wasn't, like he didn't have to call the ski patrol or whatever. Like I could just we could keep going. It was really okay. Um, but the other thing that I want to do is acknowledge Allison Bryant because she was saying those things in the 80s. Like she was a pioneer, it feels like to me. She
100%.
was
100%.
she was
I have always been in all male partnerships. Don't ask me why. And I remember going into a partner meeting, and this had to have been over a decade ago now. And I remember my team saying, and specifically the guys on my team saying, should I go downstairs and get my hockey pad and my hockey helmet for you so that you can like protect yourself as you go into the meeting? Because I would inevitably come out and my team would see my face
mm,
and I often would cry. Now, I would never have done that in front of my partners because that would have been weakness and all of those things.
mm,
But in front of my team, it was like, oof, and I
yeah.
remember my guys saying, do I need to go get my equipment for you so you can protect yourself? And I was thinking, like, isn't that awful? Like, it's awful now when we look back, but we have the Allison Bryants of the world have paved the way for so many of these conversations that we can openly discuss today and openly say, this just isn't working for me. And everybody kind of goes, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I was in conversation a little over a month ago with someone who has experienced some challenging things himself, and now his child is going through some epically challenging things. And I loved his his idea was that what they're going through, what I went through got me to the point where I can support them. What they're going through is going to mean that they're going to be okay for themselves, but also that they're going to be able to support the next people. And so, like, this is what we can do now, right? We can support
100%.
the
And I think
next
that's
people.
that whole point, is that we have to help the next in line if we can.
If we
I
can.
think it's incumbent upon us to at least offer that.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
And then, so I had the experience just last night of hearing from my child in a way that he really supported someone in his work. He works in an emergency room, and um, he took a stand last night in a very quiet, beautiful way and supported a family in need in the ER. And I think this is exactly what we're talking about. And I'm curious, how have you seen that in this next generation that you're supporting? Like, what are, if there's ways that you see? Yeah.
You know, it's so interesting. So as a prof, I work with students from all walks of life, literally. And I also work with a lot of international students. And I myself have a child who moved to an international job in a country where she doesn't speak the language. And so she had to acclimatize. So I have an enhanced sensitivity. But I have had, and more so this year than in previous years, quite a few at-risk students, at risk, and I want to say at-risk children, because that's actually the way that I have probably responded. So you shift at this point from being a prof teaching a case study, or how to be strategic, to providing a safe space for them to be vulnerable, to learn, to share when they can and can't learn, to not hand in an assignment because they have to submit it into a portal, but to sit down, have a conversation with you. And so I think for me, the biggest, if you're the kind of analogy, obviously, I'm not saving lives. And I say this to my students all the time, not saving lives, because I'm not a doctor, but I do think we can impact each other's lives. And I think we can choose to positively or negatively, but hopefully we choose positively to impact each other's lives. And I think that's where, when I talk about it being incumbent upon us to put our best selves out there, to do the least, to not do harm, and to intend to do good. I think that's, as a prof, I think that's probably what fills my cup the most, is when you see someone who is growing and developing in the direction of their dreams, when you can help someone who's having some struggles, and then you just make their lives a little bit easier, whether it's an international student or a local student that's at risk, or both, it's all wrapped up in the same person. And I think that, I think my biggest help as a prof is that we expect so much of our parents. So I think, and so many of my students are like, well, my mom didn't do this, or my dad didn't do this, or, and even to this day, they're not doing this and that. And so I often have the conversation of, maybe that's all your mom and dad can do at this moment. Maybe they are giving you everything they have. And so can you accept that they, with that, have their own humanity? And so can you lean into other people who can help you go that next level, go get the support that you need? And so I think that has actually established some grace between some of my students and their parents. So isn't that fighting? And also the parents realizing it's okay, it's safe for their own children to lean into someone else. Doesn't mean that they don't love them. It just means that someone else could perhaps bring an incremental support. The helpers could bring in that help. So now you can all live more comfortably and graciously. I think that's so important.
Yeah.
Hospital, because we've physically done something. And yet the problem with our mental requirements is that you can't see it. I can't say, oh my God, there's, this crevice in your head that is causing you to have this severe anxiety. And so, we can't see this, and yet we're all, I don't want to use that generalization. I don't want to say we're all afflicted in some way with some type of mental challenge, but I think we all have certain degrees of second guessing, having anxiety, worrying, so call that whatever you want. And it goes from, a very minor case to extremes. And I think that's where we need help. We need the helpers, and we all just need to do that with our humanity, because it's not a pinpoint diagnosis, and it can come up with the slightest thing. It could be triggered by our conversation and me not knowing something about your past. And I ask a question, and then a whole new world is unlocked, and that's not even intentional, and yet now the relationship has shifted.
Yeah. I mean,
So
it sounds like such a mentorship kind of relationship.
100%. And I think that, but I think it's mentoring, but it's honestly, it's mentoring with love. I signed a note to one of my students, XO, and I didn't even think about it. XO NG, and sends it off. And by accident, because it was part of a chain, another prof got it. And he said, do you sign all your students' emails XO? And I said, no. I said, this happens to be a container of space conversation. I think actually the student was showing him the email because it had other things in it that they were talking about. And he was like, oh, you have to be careful with this. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want to be careful with that. Actually,
Yeah.
I don't. And I actually said
Yeah.
that, you know what? I don't want to be careful with that. That student actually walks into the classroom and stands beside me until I stand up and give them a hug. So am I
How
going
wonderful.
to deny them that hug? I said, I would never
Yeah.
deny them that hug.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, you're putting yourself at risk. And he's like, well, I'm going to take that risk.
Yeah. It makes me think of, because I too, in my coaching work, and I think in the communities in which I feel safe, I've also given myself permission to express love and to feel love, to feel loved. And I mean, I come from like the teaching world where, oh my gosh, there's rules about, somebody, a teacher got in trouble for hugging a student. So then there were laws in a state about no teacher can touch a student or something like that. Like there are these
PDAs, yeah.
horrible, horrible, horrible rules that
Mhm.
I had to unlearn for myself
Yeah.
and decide that to sort of choose for myself. I choose to live in a world where love can be safely and freely expressed. And you live in that world too. And
100%,
when I
as it's
sorry,
sorry.
go
No,
ahead. Yeah.
no, you go ahead.
Well, I got to thinking about when I sign a contract, quote unquote, with someone. When a client and I come into a contract, it's not a contract, it's an agreement.
Agreed.
And it's I have had so much fun with these because they look like contracts, but they're fun. There's all these aspects of them that are a delight. And one of once I worked with a corporate attorney who, like, I will always come back to the feeling of joy that they had going through when we went through our agreement together. And there's all these little, like, the lowercase letter in parentheses that references another lowercase letter, but in this case it says things like messy is sexy instead of like corporate language or whatever. And they just delighted in it. And like the background of the whole thing was a disco ball because they loved dancing. And like it's just the fun that you can have with an agreement versus thinking about it as a rock solid contract, because agreements can be changed as needed. Like, right, making something an agreement between two trusted people is in the world that I choose to live in. So I hope that makes sense.
100%. No, I totally agree. And it's interesting that you say that. When my students in my first class, I say to my students, so this is what potentially is going to happen in this class. I'm potentially going to swear.
Mm-hmm.
I am potentially going to come up, touch your shoulders, hug you, tell you you look cute, tell you you smell good, ask you if I can steal a French fry, maybe steal a French fry, and then ask you. And I said, so I am potentially going to cross some lines, not because I have the intent to cross some lines, but that's just actually my character. So I'm sharing that with you right now. And if that's uncomfortable, I want you to let me know at the end of this class, and I will be more cautious around you. And, or I want you to, just like say to me as you're coming into class, hey, that makes me uncomfortable, or whatever it is, but give me that signal so that I don't cross your boundary. And at the same time, if this is too much for you, then I think we actually need to find you a place where you do feel safe and you can flourish. And maybe I'm not the right prof, because I want you to walk in and I want you to stand beside me so that I have to hug you. I want that. I want you to want the hug.
Yeah.
I want the hug, actually,
Yeah.
so I think that we just have to, as long as we're transparent and we both share, then I think we've set up the terms and conditions. And I think that's okay.
Yeah. 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 Oh, I love that. Well, our time is very short, Nicole.
Always.
And I know that it goes in an instant. And I'm curious if there's anything coming up for you that you want to share as we're wrapping up.
Is there anything that I specifically want to share? Well, I'm very excited as I'm sitting here because the sun is shining and I feel like spring is coming where I live. And so I'm very excited about that. And as spring is coming, I've been working on some projects that are going to be coming out, hopefully in the next few weeks. So in the spirit of, I think it's incumbent for us to share. If there's anything that I wanted to share that's out there, I've created this process called the Life Blueprint process. And I created it because I had kind of a personal disaster in my own life. So I shouldn't say kind of, definitely was. And I thought that, if we did all the right things and I was a good girl, that my life would be perfect, that everything would just fall into place. And my life has been not perfect. So definitely had some ups, downs, spirals, you name it. And so then I did what you're supposed to do. And so I got coaches, I went to workshops, I read all the books, I listened to the podcasts, I did all the things that you're supposed to do. And what I found was I would get one set of coaching here, great, but then that's just one piece of the puzzle. And then there'd be something else over here that was another piece of the puzzle. But what there wasn't was a holistic plan or process that said, bring it all together. We have all those processes in the business world because that's how we create business, and that's how we create revenue and profit and sustainability. But we don't have those in our personal lives. We have pieces, but we don't have something that cohesively brought them together. So I created this process called the Life Blueprint process. And it literally goes through, you take stock of yourself, same way that you take stock when you do a business plan. Then you go through your vision, mission, values, you isolate then your goals, you create an action plan for your goals. So now at the end of it, and we do alignment check-ins along the way. So at the end of it, you now have this very holistic, integrated plan. And then as you start to achieve things, obviously you iterate because, you achieve a goal. And so that goal kind of comes off and a new goal replaces it. And your vision for your life changes because you start to achieve things and your life starts to evolve. So I've created this process, which is what the book is about, which is what my website will start to share out there. And for me, that's my way of now helping this next generation. And I'm saying that because I make all my students do it. Even when I'm teaching a marketing course, I make them all go through this process because we don't teach it in school. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I use the excuse that it's because it's exactly like the strategic process. And so it'll serve you well. And you'll have this reminder that you carry with you. But the truth is, I put on my mom hat. And I'm like, I wish this for all children as they are going through, that they get some of these basic life skills. And so that's what I have had over 5,000 kids go through it. And it's so funny. I had a student come to me the other day and she said, do you remember that part of that process? So I've decided to go into my own business. And this is what I'm going to do because you told me to do it, because you told me to make sure that I should love what I'm doing. And so I thought it was so funny because she was like, I decided I could make money doing what I love. Oh my God, what a concept.
Yay.
So yeah, I was like, that's a win. And so we've had, I've had so many of those conversations. So that's why I've written the book. That's why I'm going, whole hog, so to speak, on this because it really has become my calling and vocation now to put this out into the world so that we can all live the life that we want. So I'm finding I'm doing that lots with students. I'm doing it with that kind of group that is had their first job or their second job and they're creating their lives and they're trying to figure out how to mesh all that together. And then I'm doing it with folks our age. So the folks who have kind of had careers, raised our kids, and then had some goals and dreams that we put on a shelf, and it's now we want to take them off the shelf, but integrating them into our lives. How do we do that? And so while obviously the process fundamentally is the same for all three, there are layers that we add for each one that make it different to allow for the nuances of the life stage that we're in.
Wow.
And so that's how I'm spending, I would say, probably 60 to 70% of my time right now. And that's hopefully shifting more towards 80 to 90 to 100% of my time.
Oh, what a thrill.
Yeah,
And
I must admit, like, that's what gives me joy when I see that somebody has gone through the process and then they're like doing what they had put on their vision board because we created the plan to go with it. Minnick and Andrew being a great example of that, but lots of others. And that is like, oh my God, like it's just, you can't even.
yeah, yeah.
It's all the
Well,
feels.
and we got a little taste of that at the when you were part of our virtual retreat back in the fall, because you brought the blueprint to us. You gave us that for some of that process,
Piece of the puzzle,
a piece
100%.
of the puzzle then, and it it really meant a lot.
Well, thank you. I was honored to be part of that. It was so funny too, because your theme was hope. And I was like, how do I incorporate hope? And hope is one of my words. So we're hopeful, humbly confident. It's, you have words that you stand
Yes.
for. And
Yeah.
it was so funny because as I was doing that presentation and preparing for it, everywhere. So I was in Stockholm visiting my daughter, and I think I shared with you, I'm literally walking along the street. There's a store named Hope. Then there's a new wine that's been launched that's called Hope. Then there's this other brand. And I'm like, oh my God, this didn't exist a month ago. And all of this is here now. And I was like, when the universe is sending you messages,
Yeah.
it's like, it's right in front of you, girl. It's right in front of you.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Well, oh, Nicole Gallucci, I'm so, so glad and honored and thrilled that we got to do this today. Um,
I'm
I, yeah. What fun.
honestly, I'm so excited to have been here. I have to be honest. I was so excited today. It's totally inappropriate, but I was saying this at the beginning, I showered for you, did my hair for a podcast. So here we
Woohoo!
are. But so honestly, I was so excited to do it. I texted all my family and I was like, I'm going to be offline for this time. So hold down the fort over there. Please don't call during this time. So honestly,
Yay.
truly, truly honored to have the conversation. It's always been great when we're in the coaching circles. You always add so much love and warmth to all the perspectives. And I think that's a huge, huge claim to fame that you have to know exudes across the cameras and our Zoom land world is this warmth and safety.
Oh, well, thank you so much. That really means a lot. That really, really means a lot. I
Thank you.
appreciate
It's
that.
very true. It's very, very
Mm.
true. So you need to know that. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Uh, for you listening, you can find Nicole in all of the socials. She's Nicole Gallucci out in the world, and her website is nicolegallucci.com. You can look down in the show notes for links to those places as well. And I always end the show with a huge appreciation for our producer. He is also the 25-time winner, I'm sorry, of the Husband of the Year award, Benjamin Kolp.
I love that. That's brilliant.
He and I have a lot of gratitude for him in this moment because, when you're planning and executing on a trip like I am, where I'm in less than 3 weeks, I'm going to be walking across the north of
Love
England.
that.
And like, there are things that I'm just like, what do I do about this? Oh my God, this feeling is happening. And last night he gave me a huge hug and he said, he basically just communicated to me like, you've got this. Like, I don't know what the next question that you'll have or the concern is, but I know that you've got it. And it's like, wow, how did I get so lucky? So
That's
thank
awesome.
you, Ben.
It
You
takes
say
two to
again?
tango. It takes two to
Yeah.
tango, my friend.
Yeah. I'm a lucky, lucky, lucky lady, and I have a lot of
And I'm
gratitude
sure
for
he
you.
would say the same.
Hmm.
Sure
He's
he would.
hearing this right now because he's mixing this. So,
There you go.
thank you, Ben. Thank you so much for you listening. I'm excited to have you along for the ride as well. I will be sharing about my trip as I am doing it. You can find me at We Turned Out OKAY in Instagram. I am in LinkedIn. I have the link down below because it's like K Lock Kolp and then a whole bunch of letters and numbers. And anyway, so that's where you can find me. And I'm so glad and grateful that you're here. And we will see you next time. Bye.